And one thing I'll just mention also is, in blogging, blogging is an active thing. And blogging could be anything. You could blog for any one of a number of reasons, and a lot of institutions have blogs that have professional bloggers writing for them and so on. Blogging is a thing. It's like writing or driving. You could be a driver who drives a truck or a driver that commutes to work or whatever. Blogging is like that. But there is a kind of a culture as well, and within the blogosphere, certain things happen habitually on a regular basis among usually commenters. We have the phenomenon called trolling, where people come onto blogs and they behave badly as commenters. There are fights between bloggers that have certain characteristic patterns. And one of the things that Stephanie has done is written a growing number of posts that are actually pretty serious analyses of those phenomena, which are useful because you can just point to them.
Yeah, I've kind of found they're very, very, very helpful as far as, because a lot of the rules that people discuss have been never really formalized before, so it's really kind of hard to, to know whether or not you're going to respond in a specific way, whether or not it'll have an effect, or how do you kind of dismiss somebody, or how do you recognize when somebody's doing something to you on your own blog, that type of thing. And that type of thing is really pretty helpful. But I'm wondering if perhaps we could start coming back into the atheism part of it and the skepticism. You spend a lot of time on different scientific issues and so forth. With anthropology, your background as a biological anthropologist in a lot of different areas, and your approach really on how to look at different issues is very, very set in guideline. How do you think that kind of helps people that may or may not have realized that they were interested in atheism kind of come around to seeing how an atheist would look at life or look at things?
Well, I think for a long time, in the first half of my blog's history, that all happened through the question of science education and creationism in schools. Okay, and I wrote things. Interestingly, blogs are not allowed into most schools, so you can't just get onto a blog in a high school. Mm-hmm. So, but I wrote things about. My wife is a biology teacher, and I've been involved in science standards development and in the creation evolution debate. I've been involved in that debate since for way back, and so I wrote about things that happen to you as a teacher, things that happen to you in high school settings, and that was meant to let people who are complacent about the issue realize that complacency is actually damaging the whole system. If you sit there and say, I don't care about the creation evolution debate, it's not really a debate. We hear that a lot from scientists. It's bankrupt, the creationists have nothing important to say. Fine, but they are ruining our entire system of education. Mm-hmm. And if that's important to you and you're not involved, then you're actually hurting. You're actually hurting the system. And that's sort of my point. And writing things that teachers could use and say, I am not alone. This thing that's happening to me in my school, where this student keeps coming into my biology class with a Bible, actually happens to other people. And here's how other people have dealt with it. And when you start discussing that, it's not about atheism, but it is about religion. Mm-hmm. And you start seeing, well, gee, it's about secularism. That it's actually an issue of legal secularism, separation of church and state. And it only in the pragmatic, in the trenches, in the pragmatic reality of what happens in your child's classroom. And we have a problem where the Christian pro-creationist groups are organized. These children who come into schools with their Bibles didn't think this up themselves. This is part of an organized movement. And what we need is a counter-organized movement, and it exists. And the bloggers are a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how that starts. And that's a good way to bring secularism, atheism, and agnosticism onto the table, because it isn't just a hypothetical, my neighbor's a Christian, I'm not.
Right.
It's my neighbor and I are fighting over whether or not we get good science education in the schools. It's
a
real issue.
Not only have you spoken to the teachers, using the social part of social media in that, but you've also, for example, last year when the science standards were being worked on, you've made specific announcements. This meeting is going to be in this place at this date. Here's what you need to go and focus on. Here are the things that are controversial that you need to let people know you care about.
Right. The reason there were 500 people, I think it was a number, who showed up at the intelligent design debate that P.Z. Myers was involved in was because they heard about it on our blogs.
Right.
And went for that reason.
Right.
I mean, including the cache, the website. I mean, the blogosphere helped distribute that information, and the number of people that showed up at that.
And there was a lot of good analysis after that was over through the blogosphere that kind of, for the people that weren't able to be there, to get a sense of how that had worked out. And this was really about only a week and a half ago, and And it helped expose the creationist in a way that might not have happened otherwise if it was just a small gathering that nobody had ever written about afterwards, and having the immediacy of sharing that among the whole blogosphere in a way.
Well, and
You know?
not only that, but the fact that everybody was then able to go and link to other people's
Right.
writings. I mean, again, it's the social, it's creating that community. You know, when you're blogging, like when you're an atheist, you can feel really alone out there. But when people are sharing links, when people are going around and reading and commenting on each other's blogs, or even just going out and commenting, I mean, you start to actually form a space on the internet where people can hang out.
Right.
People who may never have had a chance to hang out with another atheist. Last week or earlier this week, there was an article in the Owatonna News about two atheists who were in Owatonna. Neither one of them knew that there was another atheist in Owatonna.
Right.
I mean, we can take this for granted in Minneapolis or in St. Paul, where there are lots of people, but for somebody who's living, and Owatonna is not that small, somebody who's living someplace like that, being able to reach out online is big.
Well, I think of even somebody up in Halleck, where I grew up,
Which is
go up
small.
there. Yeah, 1,500 people. But I had people coming up to me at my mom's funeral when I was up there. You've been doing Tangled Up in Blue Guy, and I read you all the time, and it's kind of like, it's nice to know that somebody from Halleck is also an atheist, that I wasn't the only one. You know?
My writers group, two other people, until I started posting some of my blog posts on Facebook where we organize our meetings, I didn't know that they were both atheists. One of them literally said to me last time we met, you know, I don't have anybody else to talk about this with. I was taught in school by my parents, you don't talk to people about this or you get in trouble.
Right.